It was supposed to be just another late-night interview. The usual blend of studio lights, pre-written jokes, and rehearsed banter. But what happened that night between Elon Musk and Jimmy Kimmel would flip the entire industry on its head. Millions were watching live when Elon leaned forward and asked the one question no guest ever dares. Are those your questions, Jimmy? Or someone else's? What followed wasn't just uncomfortable. It was a public unmasking. And when the dust settled, people weren't just talking about Elon. They were questioning everything they thought they knew about media, truth, and control. Before we dive in, if you're someone who values raw honesty over scripted performance, support stories like this by subscribing now. Every subscription helps us bring more real moments to light. The interview started with the usual fanfare, theme music, applause signs flashing, and Jimmy Kimmel flashing his trademark smirk to the cameras. Elon Musk walked onto the stage to thunderous cheers. The crowd, as always, was eager for a mix of humor, controversy, and maybe a few shocking sound bites. Elon shook Jimmy's hand, sat down, and smiled. Polite, professional. But beneath that calm exterior, something was off, and it wouldn't take long for the world to see it. Jimmy opened with a few softball questions, jokes about Mars, Tesla's Twitter drama. Elon answered each one with his usual calm precision. But the atmosphere was tense, the kind of tension you only notice when something isn't quite right. Then came the shift. Jimmy brought up a private message, something Elon had said about the government. But instead of quoting it accurately, he twisted the words, added a sarcastic tone, and tossed it to the audience like bait. Laughter followed, but it wasn't real. It was that hollow, studio-trained kind of laugh, the kind you hear when people aren't sure if it's okay to laugh. Elon didn't smile. He didn't laugh it off. Instead, he looked Jimmy straight in the eyes and asked, "You brought me here to embarrass me, didn't you?" The audience went dead silent. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. You could hear the cameras whirring, the crew shifting nervously behind the scenes, and even a faint gasp from someone in the front row. Jimmy tried to brush it off. "Come on, Elon. It's all in good fun." But Elon wasn't having it. "You're not a comedian anymore," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "You're a puppet." That's when everything changed. The room froze. The laughter didn't come back. Even Jimmy's face dropped. His eyes flickered with something between shock and fear. He stammered, reaching for a joke, a punchline, anything to take control back. But Elon kept going. Calm, relentless, controlled. He began talking about media manipulation, about how comedy shows like this pretend to be harmless entertainment while pushing narratives written by people behind the curtain. "You call this entertainment?" he asked, bringing guests on just to ambush them, pretending it's all in good fun while hiding behind script. Jimmy tried again to regain footing. "Let's not get too serious, Elon," he chuckled nervously. But Elon leaned forward, and what he said next turned into the headline of the year. "What if the joke is on all of you? If you're still with us and you want to see how far this moment reached and what Elon exposed about the system, drop your city in the comments. We want to know just how far this truth is traveling." The studio was no longer a safe space. It had become a courtroom. Elon was the witness, Jimmy the defendant, and the audience, the jury. Some looked around, unsure whether to applaud or stay silent. Others just sat frozen. Jimmy fumbled again, flipping through his note cards, trying to shift the conversation back to Tesla. "Let's talk about your new model," he offered. But Elon just stared at him. "Are those your questions, Jimmy? Or someone else's?" Boom. It wasn't just a clap back. It was a revelation. And with that one sentence, Elon exposed something deeper. This wasn't a conversation. It was a performance. And Jimmy? He was just reading lines. This is only the beginning. Because what Elon said next would leave the entire industry in panic. Subscribe if you believe moments like this deserve to be seen, not censored. The air in the studio had turned dense. Every breath, every glance, every shuffle in his seat felt amplified. Jimmy Kimmel, once the conductor of controlled chaos, was now visibly unraveling. His signature grin was gone, replaced by tight lips and darting eyes. He was searching for a joke, a cue, an exit. But Elon Musk had seized control of the room, and he wasn't letting go. Just moments ago, this was a comedy show. But now it was a televised reckoning. Elon had pulled back the curtain, and no one, not even the production crew, seemed to know what to do next. Jimmy tried once more to lighten the mood. "All right, maybe we got off on the wrong foot," he said with a laugh that didn't quite land. But Elon wasn't smiling. He leaned back in his chair, completely composed, and delivered a line that struck deeper than anything so far. "The problem isn't how we started, Jimmy. The problem is how long people like you have been pretending." The silence returned. Not the awkward kind, but the heavy, haunted kind. The kind of silence that settles in when someone speaks a truth that's been buried for far too long. Elon wasn't raising his voice. He didn't need to. His calmness was more powerful than any outburst. He began talking about the danger of performative journalism, how emotional manipulation had replaced integrity, and how public figures are often ambushed under the guise of entertainment. "You're not informing anyone," he said. "You're reinforcing what they've already been told to believe." Jimmy sat stiffly, hands clasped, fingers fidgeting. He tried to pivot again, tossing out a harmless question about Tesla's next car model. Elon paused, staring at him like he'd just insulted everyone watching. "You're really going to ignore everything I just said and talk about cars?" Another direct hit. In that instant, something shifted in the audience. They weren't sure who to side with anymore. Jimmy was supposed to be the host, the crowd favorite, the safe pair of hands. But here he was looking lost, exposed. Elon wasn't just talking to Jimmy anymore. He was talking to everyone. And then came the hammer. "You're the guy who cried on TV about politics," Elon said, his voice still calm. "You act like you care about the truth, about justice, but only when it fits your narrative. The second someone disagrees, they become the villain. That's not comedy, Jimmy. That's propaganda." The crowd stirred. Some shifted in their seats, unsure whether they were still part of a comedy show or something far more serious. A few heads nodded. A few arms crossed. You could feel the discomfort vibrating off the studio walls. Jimmy's smile had fully faded now. He looked toward the camera, silently pleading for a commercial, some kind of lifeline. But none came. The producers weren't cutting. The cameras kept rolling. And Elon kept speaking. "If you think this is uncomfortable," he said, "good. Maybe it's about time America felt uncomfortable. Let that sink in. If you've ever felt like the news, the shows, the interviews are just rehearsed scripts dressed up as truth, then this story matters. Subscribe now to stay with us as we pull back the curtain further." Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Elon didn't interrupt. He just waited, letting the silence do its work. The kind of silence that makes people question everything. Then, as if realizing his time was limited, Elon leaned in again. "You bring politicians on this show," he said, "and let them lie. Without challenge. Without pushback. You're not a comedian anymore, Jimmy. You're a shield for the corrupt." That line would become the quote that lit the internet on fire. Within minutes of the interview ending, it would be clipped, shared, reposted, and debated on every social platform in existence. But in that moment, in that studio, the crew was frozen. The control room, by now, was surely scrambling. Nothing was going according to script. This was supposed to be good PR, a boost in ratings. Instead, it had become a storm. Jimmy gestured weakly toward the side of the stage, signaling to someone off camera. Elon stood, but before walking off, he turned to the audience and said, "Ask yourselves, who really controls what you hear? And why are they so afraid of people who speak without a script?" He didn't wait for applause. He didn't wave. He just walked. No promo. No punchline. No filter. And the audience? They didn't know whether to clap or just sit in stunned silence. What came next would push this moment far beyond the studio walls, and far beyond anything Jimmy Kimmel's show was prepared for. Because Elon Musk hadn't just called out a comedian. He'd sparked a nationwide conversation about truth, manipulation, and the power of speaking freely. Don't go anywhere. What happened in the next 24 hours changed the media forever. The moment Elon Musk walked off that stage, the internet ignited like dry tinder catching a spark. Clips of the confrontation flooded YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, everywhere. Within hours, hashtags like hashtag Elon unscripted, hashtag Kimmel exposed, and hashtag who writes the script were trending worldwide. But this wasn't just a viral moment. It felt different, bigger, like a fault line had cracked open beneath late-night television, and everyone was finally seeing what was underneath. Meanwhile, back at the studio, Jimmy Kimmel sat frozen. The set around him, once a playground of punchlines and applause, now felt like a crime scene. You could see in his face, he wasn't just stunned. He was embarrassed, defeated, and worst of all, unprepared. The producers scrambled. Segments were cut. The official broadcast was edited, trimmed, and sterilized before it aired that night. But it didn't matter. The raw footage had already escaped the control room. Someone, maybe a crew member, maybe an intern, maybe just someone who believed the truth deserved to be seen, had leaked the uncut clip. And once it hit the web, it was unstoppable. Every corner of the internet was alive with debate. Was Elon being arrogant? Or was he just saying what millions had felt for years, but never had the platform to express? The opinions clashed hard. But one thing was undeniable. People were watching. A-list celebrities began to weigh in. One actor tweeted, "Elon just said what half of America's been thinking for a decade. Mad respect." Another posted, "That wasn't an interview. That was a takedown. And it needed to happen." And yet, the backlash came just as fast. Networks panicked. Sponsors threatened to pull ads. Headlines popped up overnight, desperately trying to control the narrative. Elon melts down on Kimmel. Kimmel humiliates Musk on live TV. Unhinged or hero, Elon Musk sparks controversy. But the internet wasn't buying it. They had seen the truth unfold, unedited and unfiltered. They saw a man calmly speak what others were too afraid to say, and refused to be manipulated by a host with an agenda. If you're still here, and this story resonates with you, take a second and tap that subscribe button. We're building a movement of voices who refuse to be silenced by fake smiles and rehearsed scripts. Jimmy Kimmel's team wasn't done trying. According to rumors circulating just days after the interview, his legal team reached out privately to Elon's representatives. The message? Do not use the footage elsewhere. The claim was that the content was misleading and out of context. But that only raised more questions. If it was just a joke, why panic? If it was just comedy, why silence the clip? If Elon was truly out of line, why not let the footage speak for itself? Because it wasn't just a joke, and everyone watching knew it. This wasn't a PR stunt. It wasn't a meltdown. It was a man stepping onto a stage, stripping away the illusion, and daring to tell the truth in a room full of people paid to keep quiet. And that's why the story didn't die down. Instead, it spread like wildfire. Podcasters dissected every second of the clip. Commentators debated its meaning. Memes exploded. Some showed Elon in a gladiator's armor, standing on a burning set. Others had Jimmy clinging to a script labeled "Control the Narrative." The message was clear. Elon hadn't just left the interview. He had detonated a bomb beneath late-night television. But while the world debated, Elon remained silent. No tweets, no interviews, no public statements. And that silence? It said more than 1,000 headlines ever could. People started to see him differently, not as just a billionaire tech mogul, but as a symbol. A man who had walked into the lion's den and refused to bow. And that kind of defiance, it's rare. It's dangerous, but it's also deeply human. Late-night comedy had always been a playground for hidden agendas dressed up as laughter. But now, with one guest refusing to play along, the rules had changed. The facade was broken. The laughter hollow. The applause suspect. And the audience? They were wide awake. Because once you see the strings, you can't unsee the puppet show. The question wasn't whether Elon Musk went too far. The question was, why did it take a billionaire engineer to finally say what everyone else was too afraid to? And what would happen if more people stopped laughing and started thinking? In the days that followed, a strange kind of silence settled over Jimmy Kimmel's world. Not the comfortable silence of a punchline that lands perfectly, but the suffocating kind. The kind that follows after something breaks, and everyone's pretending they didn't hear it. His next episode aired like clockwork. Same desk, same band, same laugh track. But something was missing: authenticity. The monologue felt hollow, the jokes didn't land. Even his signature smirk seemed artificial. like he was performing the version of himself people expected, not the man who had just been dismantled on national television. Meanwhile, the internet hadn't moved on. Quite the opposite. Clips of Elon's confrontation continued to dominate every platform. The comments weren't just reactions anymore. They were reflections. People were asking the kind of questions that mainstream media usually avoids. Why are all these interviews scripted? Why do we only ever hear one side of the story? Who decides what we laugh at and what we never hear about? And most importantly, why was Elon the only one willing to speak up? Communities sprang up overnight. Forums filled with discussion threads titled "The Elon Interview That Changed Everything" or "Kimmel's Exposure, The Real Agenda." It was no longer about the show. It was about the system. And for the first time in a long time, the curtain had been pulled back. Elon never commented publicly, but his silence became a kind of rallying cry. Every repost, every share, every reaction added fuel to the fire. People weren't just listening, they were waking up. A truth had been spoken, and it couldn't be unheard. And it wasn't just everyday viewers noticing. Inside Hollywood, something was shifting. Comedians, real ones, started speaking up. Not with jokes, but with concerns. One well-known stand-up said during a podcast, "If your joke can't survive without a safety net, maybe it's not that funny." Another tweeted, "Late-night shows used to challenge power. Now they protect it." The truth stung because it was real, and now the audience knew. If this video is giving you a new lens to view the media through, support this type of storytelling by subscribing. It helps us keep uncovering what others try to bury. Behind the scenes, Jimmy's show was in crisis mode. Internal memos were leaked showing producers debating whether to issue a public statement. Some pushed for damage control. Others argued that addressing it would only give the moment more power. But it was already too late. The machine had been caught glitching, and Elon Musk was the one who kicked the circuit. The most revealing detail came in the form of a report published quietly by a mid-level entertainment journalist. According to an anonymous crew member on set that night, Jimmy's team had rehearsed the ambush. The joke, the timing, the spontaneous reaction. It was all planned, right down to the clip they'd hoped would go viral. But they never expected Elon to fight back. Certainly not like that. The plan had been simple. Poke the bear, stir up social media, and score a few million views. But instead of taking the bait, Elon flipped the table. And when that happened, it revealed something terrifying to those behind the scenes. The audience didn't want the circus anymore. They wanted the truth. It wasn't about being anti-comedy. It was about being anti-fake. Elon hadn't ruined the show. He had reminded people what authenticity looks like. The ripple effect started small. Some viewers said they'd stopped watching late-night shows altogether. Others said they'd unsubscribed from certain channels or followed new creators who weren't afraid to ask real questions. The power had started shifting, and not just digitally, culturally. One college student posted a video saying, "For the first time, I questioned what I've been laughing at my whole life. And who taught me to laugh in the first place?" That's what happens when someone speaks without a filter. They don't just disrupt a moment. They spark a movement. So the next time you watch someone laugh on cue, or hear applause that feels forced, or see an interview that seems too smooth, remember that night. Remember the silence in the room when Elon asked, "What if the joke is on all of you?" Because deep down, we already knew the answer. And now, we were ready to ask what else had been hidden behind the laughter. The confrontation between Elon Musk and Jimmy Kimmel had become more than just a viral moment. It was now a cultural pivot point. Late-night television, once considered harmless entertainment, now found itself under a microscope. What was once shrugged off as comedy now looked suspiciously like a mechanism, one designed to shape public perception with a smile. But here's the thing, Elon didn't just walk into a studio that night. He walked into a machine polished with makeup and monologues, cloaked in charisma and applause, but one that operated with ruthless precision. And he broke it, not with anger, not with theatrics, but with quiet truth. That's why his words echoed. They don't want you thinking. They want you laughing while they take everything from you. It wasn't just a mic drop. It was a mirror. People started replaying the clip, not just to watch Jimmy squirm, but to hear what Elon was actually saying. Every pause, every sentence, every challenge. Because the more you listened, the more it didn't sound like a rant. It sounded like a warning. And people were listening. College campuses hosted watch parties. Podcasts broke down the footage frame by frame. Independent journalists wrote op-eds about the state of comedy and its disturbing overlap with propaganda. Even a few former TV writers came forward anonymously, confirming what Elon had implied, that most late-night interviews are pre-approved, pre-written, and pre-calculated. One anonymous writer said, "There's a running joke in the industry that the audience is just a warm body. They're to clap on cue and never ask questions." Elon broke that illusion. And yet, Elon still said nothing. No tweets, no statements, not even a meme. His silence only intensified the moment. He didn't need to speak because the people were speaking for him. They were angry, inspired, awakened. They started asking the right questions. Who decides what's funny? Why is comedy only brave when it punches in one direction? And why are we told to laugh instead of think? The very foundation of media manipulation began to fracture, not because of scandal, but because someone had the audacity to say the obvious out loud. And this wasn't about agreeing with Elon Musk. It was about the moment he became a stand-in for anyone who's ever felt gaslit by smiling faces on screens. Anyone who's ever sensed something wasn't quite right with a narrative, but didn't know how to say it. That night, Elon said it for them. And then something wild happened. A group of independent creators launched a movement called Unscripted. Its mission? To platform raw, unedited conversations. No handlers, no PR filters, no safe takes. Just truth, no matter how uncomfortable. It gained traction fast. People were tired of the polish. Tired of being sold ideas in between laugh tracks. They wanted real. Even if it was messy. Even if it meant confronting uncomfortable truths. And while Jimmy Kimmel returned to his show night after night, cracking jokes and pretending the moment never happened, the world had changed. Because you can only laugh at something you trust. And trust had left the building. If you're one of the millions craving authenticity over performance, and you're still watching this story unfold with us, hit subscribe and stay with us. You're part of something that's just beginning. So where does that leave Jimmy? With a legacy forever stained by the night, he lost control, not just of an interview, but of the illusion. And Elon, still silent, still powerful, still a reminder that sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is tell the truth in a room full of people pretending. And whether you loved him or hated him for it, no one could unsee what he exposed. But there was still one final question echoing across every screen, every thread, every share. If they scripted the laughter, what else did they script? And that question would lead to a reckoning far beyond one interview. As the dust settled from the confrontation that rocked late-night television, one thing became undeniable. People weren't going back to sleep. The illusion had been broken, and what lay behind it wasn't comedy. It was control. And now, millions were awake. What began as a single guest refusing to play along became a catalyst for something larger, a shift in awareness. Viewers everywhere started noticing the patterns, the predictability of the jokes, the selective outrage, the repetition of approved narratives dressed up as monologues. The entertainment no longer felt like entertainment. It felt like programming. But Elon hadn't set out to lead a movement. He hadn't come on a show to provoke chaos. In his own words, "I came here because I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of people pretending to be brave while hiding behind applause signs and laugh tracks." And that's what struck so many people, his intention. It wasn't to be viral. It was to be real. And in a world obsessed with performance, real is revolutionary. Jimmy Kimmel, once a cultural darling, now found himself at the center of uncomfortable questions. The media tried to spin the narrative, but their words felt hollow. The headlines that once shaped public perception now fell flat against a truth people had already seen with their own eyes. And yet, there were no boycotts, no official statements from Elon. He didn't need them, because his silence did what no viral tweet ever could. It left space for people to reflect. And in that reflection, people didn't just question Jimmy. They questioned everything. How many other shows have been scripted like this? How many interviews have been manufactured for applause? How many narratives have we swallowed because they came with a laugh track? The consequences rippled outward. Viewership of mainstream talk shows dipped. Independent voices surged. And late night, as a genre, began to feel outdated. Like a leftover relic from a time when people didn't know better. But now they did. Creators, comedians, journalists, those with integrity, began rethinking how they approached their work. The goal was no longer just to entertain, but to engage honestly. To speak truth, not just deliver punchlines. Because of one moment, one man, one refusal to be controlled. And that's where the real impact lies. This wasn't about Elon Musk being a billionaire or a provocateur. It was about a person who walked into a room built to manipulate and said, "No, not this time." He exposed a truth we already felt deep down, that we've been laughing at the wrong things for far too long. And when the cameras stopped rolling and the fake smiles faded and the headlines lost their grip, something remained. A new standard, a demand for something real, for something brave, for something that doesn't need to hide behind applause. So now, we're left with a choice. Do we keep playing along? Or do we start asking the same question Elon asked that night? What if the joke is on all of us? You decide. But if this story moved you, if you believe in cutting through the noise, in standing for truth even when it's uncomfortable, make sure you subscribe right now. Your support fuels these stories, and it lets the world know we're not asleep anymore. And before you go, take a second to click the card on your screen and watch the next powerful story we've uncovered. Trust me, it's one you don't want to miss.